Psalm 50. The Mighty One, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth, from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes, he does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire, around him a mighty tempest. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather to me, my faithful ones, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. But to the wicked, God says, what right have you to recite my statutes or take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline, and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself, but now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you. Mark this then, you who forgot God, lest I tear you apart and there be none to deliver. The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God.
Sarah? Good morning, Vine Church. We have our last week in our series on our core values. Just a little heads up for next week. We are going to be doing a Thanksgiving testimony service. We've kind of done this. This is a tradition for us that on the weekend of Thanksgiving, we usually do it. We're doing it the week before this year. As you could tell, Thanksgiving is a little messed up this year, isn't it? A little later than normal. And we don't want to push that into our Christmas season. And so next week, we're going to do our typical Thanksgiving testimony service. So I want you to be aware of that for a multitude of different reasons. I want you to give some thought this next week, not that you don't always, but intentionally maybe so this next week, to be thinking through some praises, testimony, Thanksgiving, stuff like that. Just kind of take an opportunity to assess the last year, how God's been working in your life the last year. And so we'll come gathered next week as we always do, but you're not going to hear a sermon. You're going to hear from one another. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to declare and to see what God's doing in other people. We get to see what God does every week through the scriptures, but it's a beautiful thing when you can hear it from one another, the works that God is doing in our lives. And so look forward to that next Sunday. That's going to prep us then and leading into your Thanksgiving that next following Thursday after that, and then we'll be into our Christmas season. So today, though, we have our last series in our core values. I'm going to go ahead and pray, ask God to bless us, and then we'll go open up the scriptures together. So let's pray. Father, thank you so much. Thank you for the fact that we know that we're meeting with you as we open up your word. Lord, as we prayed this morning, as we read your scriptures, as we sang to you, Lord, you are here present in your church. And Lord, we are here to honor you, to worship you, to pray a prayer of thanksgiving, and Lord, just to have our hearts in tune and connected to yours. Lord, however it is that we are falling short or bringing evil into this world or sinning, Lord, I pray that you would convict us of that this morning. Lord, I pray that you would shower us with your grace and your mercy and help us become a people of grace and mercy. And so, Lord, change my heart as you need to. The hearts of those in this room, Lord, may we be open to your and receptive to your change. And so, Lord, meet with us today. We love you and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So there you have it. We are a church that we've talked through who we are and who we're hoping to be. We are loving Jesus and those he created. We're all about truth, authentic growth, community, missional witness, and service. That we've discussed that at length the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, somewhere in that range. And those ideas there, our mission statement, our core values, those are something that I've been trying to use as markers to live my life and guide our church for the last 10 years or so. I was thinking about it this last week. The core values that we have are values that I put on paper when I originally applied for the job at the church that we're at here, right? I'd say it was Briar Church because it was Briar Church that merged into the Vine Church, but it was almost 10 years ago. This July will be 10 years for myself with that church. And I remember sitting down with the elders at that time and walking them through just what I believe the Bible describes as a healthy church. And these were the values, to some extent, slightly changed, but for the most part, the values that I discussed with them 10 years ago. And I look at it and say, man, my life reflects this to some extent, and my life needs work in these areas to some extent. And I would say the same thing for us as a church, that we reflect these values. At the same point, we're maturing in these values as well. One thing I did not throw out to the elders at that time, something that I think was core to my life and I think the ministry of our church, but something I think over time has been fleshed out a little bit more and made more clear, and that's kind of the last thing I want to talk with you about this morning, is this idea that I'm hoping in the Vine Church, not just our mission statement, not just our core values, but I hope that there's a cultural dynamic that could just infiltrate the entirety of our church. And the cultural dynamic that I'd want there is that we would be a church that has a culture of grace. That grace would just be infused in everything that we do as a church. And underlying all that we do, that there's a culture of grace. I think practically I've been trying my best to live that out. And I think churches tend to take on a culture of grace, or sometimes I would throw out a culture of law. These are two competing biblical themes that you see often in the scriptures. And the idea of culture of law is sometimes churches are very rule-based, very did you do good or bad today, more law-oriented, and sometimes become a little bit more of a hardened type people that are more like looking for how people are doing, whether or not they're doing right or not doing right, as opposed to a church that is compassionate and merciful and looking for how they can bestow favor on someone else and to give love. And so if we're going to be one or the other, I would hope that we be a culture of grace at the Vine Church. I've tried to live that out as best I can, and it was interesting. This idea of grace connected to God was something presented in a more profound way when I was doing some classes at Western Seminary. So when I was taking 3 or 4 years ago, I was taking some master's classes at Western Seminary down in Portland, and my professor at the time, Gary Bershears, was my theology professor. And I was sitting in a class with him, and he threw out a question that I'm going to kind of throw out and talk through here today. The passage I'm going to talk about here today is something he taught on that day, and it kind of threw me for a loop, but it was kind of ingrained in what I was already trying to do, I think. But he threw out the question to class of saying, if you met somebody that has no understanding of who God is, how would you describe God to somebody? Like what terminology, what words would you use to describe God to someone that knows nothing about God? So he asked this question to the class, and the class starts throwing out the typical attributes of God kind of description, right? As you probably would. You ever heard like the attributes of God? I'm sure you've seen it in some kind of study book or something. Just the idea of like the Bible describes different attributes that God has, and we kind of list those out often in like, 15, 20, 30 different lists of things that are attributes of God, and we use up the Bible to try to back up those things. So the class was throwing those out. He's just, he's sovereign, he's all powerful, he's all present, he's present everywhere all the time, he's Lord and King, he's love, they just start throwing out those pieces. So how would you, if someone were to just come up to you and say, I hear the term God used, but like who is he? What's he like? What's his character? How would you describe God to someone? So the class is throwing out all these pieces. And it was interesting that the idea of grace and mercy was in there a bit, but it was way down the list and somewhere remotely off to the side. Oftentimes what was thrown out was more of the majestic aspect of God, like he's sovereign, he's powerful, he's in control, he's, those kind of pieces. That's typical what was kind of thrown out as kind of the primary pieces of God. And Gary said, Bershears there, the theology professor, he's like, okay, instead of us coming up with a list, let's see what God has to say about himself. And it was interesting. It kind of took me back. I'm like, does God describes himself? Like, I don't know in the scriptures where he does that. And so he takes us to a passage in Exodus chapter 33 is where we're going to be this morning, 33 and 34 a bit. And this is a passage in which God is going to be describing himself. So we're going to set that stage and walk into this passage and then hope we can see through all this how we would hope to be a church that is a culture of grace. So if you have a Bible, phone app, something like that with you where you can get the scriptures in front of you, if you could turn to Exodus chapter 33, and we're going to start in verse 12. Set a little bit of background here, right? This is Moses takes the people out of Egypt, right? He takes the Hebrew people out of Egypt. They've crossed through the Red Sea, and they're at the base of Mount Sinai at this passage. They're at the base of Mount Sinai. They've been there for quite some time. Moses has already made his trek up to the mountain with the tablets of stone where God writes out the 10 Commandments. He's already done that. He's come back down from the mountain. He saw the people worshiping the golden calf. Now the tablets are broken by Moses because he's upset. So now we got to go to round 2 of taking the stone tablets up to the mountain for God to write the 10 Commandments on it again. That's the story that's happening here. We're past the first writing of the stone. We're past the golden calf and the breaking of the stones. And this is the point where Moses is about to go back up a second time and meet with God. Before he does that, God tells Moses that you're going to lead my people into the promised land, this land that I have for them. So God just gets done telling Moses, hey, you're leading my people into the promised land. This picks up right where we're at here, verse 12. Hey, Moses said to the Lord, see, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know to whom you will send with me. Okay, so Moses is saying, okay, I'm going to lead these people. You're telling me I'm going to lead the people, but who's going with me? I'm not doing this alone, is what he's saying. There's a ton of people here, and we already kind of know a bit about who they are, their character. Like, I'm not doing this alone, God. Someone better be here to help me. And I think you'll see in a minute, when he's saying someone better be here to help me, he's essentially saying, you better come with me. You better be here, because I'm not doing this alone. He throws out after that. Yet you have said, so he's reminding God of stuff that God said, yet you have said, I know you by name, and you've also found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me your ways that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. So Moses is reminding God a few things that God has said to Moses. And God has said to Moses, hey Moses, I know you by name, and you have found favor in my sight. And Moses is reminding God. He's like, hey God, remember when you said that you know me by name and that there's favor? Like, if that's true, then show me your ways, is what he says to him. That's an interesting wording when the idea that God would know Moses by name. That's profound, right? Think of somebody that's like really well known, has prominence, has like just a lot of like attention. Like sometimes you know those people by their name, but you usually don't know them on a first name basis, right? Think about whatever celebrity, important person, whatever you might put in there. I was trying to think about names that you could throw out that aren't going to get in trouble. I was thinking through presidential ones. I'm like, no matter which one I use, I'm going to be in trouble for which one of those I'm going to use. And then I threw out like, well, everybody knows like Jeff Bezos, but you get in trouble for that one around here too. So like, Bill Gates is pretty good, right? He's old enough, been through enough to where like we kind of look at him as the older man, right? I don't know, maybe he could be. Either way, you know of the name Bill Gates when the name's thrown out. Specifically in our area, you know of Bill Gates. You drive by his building in Seattle where there's foundation, where there's doing all kinds of stuff. You probably have tried to some extent see the house that he has over on Lake Washington. You've taken a cruise or something that goes by it and tries to look up. We know who Bill Gates is. You don't know Billy. You don't know William. I don't know. What do his friends call him? You don't know that. You don't know that person. Maybe you do. Let me know afterwards. We'll get... But we know of a name, first, last name, and the perception of a person, but there's a difference when you know them by name, know them by first name. So not only is that kind of a big deal, but this is kind of reversed. This is where the person of prominence and power knows the person without any prominence or power by their first name. That's a huge deal. So it wouldn't be like just us knowing Bill as Billy or whatever. It would be Bill knowing my name. That he would walk down the street and he would see Brandon and think, oh, hey, Brandon, how's it going? Like, he wouldn't even know that I'm Brandon Hudson. He wouldn't even know who I am. But if he does, to know him well enough to know him by a first name basis, and carried with that, meaning he knows something of who I am. He knows my character. He knows what makes up who I am. And what Moses is saying here is he's saying, hey, God, you said that you know me by name. You've said, God, that you know, that you know everything. Like, we're on a first name basis here. And you've said that your favor is upon me. If that's the case, and you're asking me to lead these people, then show me your ways. What's he saying by saying, show me your ways? He's saying, don't just give me your name, but let me know who you are, your character, what makes up. You know that, the people that you know well, you know them because you've spent time with them in the good times and the bad times, and you've been through them enough to where you get to know who they really are. Not with the face they put on, not what other people might know them as, but the people you know well are the ones that you've seen in every season of life, and you know their character. You know who they are, you know what makes up who they are, you know them. Not just a name, but you know the core of their character and who they are. This is what Moses is saying. Show me your ways, show me the character, let me know who you are, the detailed aspect. If we're on a first name basis here, then let me in and let me see it all. Let me know exactly who you are. Not just the face that you give out to the world. Let me see it all, is what Moses is saying. Then he goes on right after that in second part of verse 13, he says, consider too that this nation is your people. And he said, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. And he said to him, if your presence will not go with me, then do not bring us up out from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not in your going with us, so that we are distinct, I and your people, that from every other people on the face of the earth? So he says here, consider this, that this nation is your people. I love how he throws it out. Hey, God, you're asking me to lead them. You remember, they're not mine. I'm not claiming them. They're yours. Because he's going to say at the end of this thing that they're a stiff-necked people. They're a hardened, hard-hearted type of people. Remember, they're yours. They're not mine. And also remember that you told me something about them. You said that your presence is going to go with, that my presence is going to go with you, and I will give you rest. So he's reminding God of stuff that God said. This takes a little guts, right? He's reminding God both to say, hey, remember that you know me by name, remember that I found favor, and now he's saying, hey, you better remember that you said you're going with us. These are your people, not my people, and you're going with us. You said it. You told me you're going with us, you're going to lead us, and you're going to give us rest. So he's reminding God of stuff that God said. In the midst of his whole point in this is okay, if I'm going to lead these people, you're coming with, and you better show up and show yourself to me in a profound way that I get to know who you are if I'm going to tackle this task that's in front of me. It says in verse 17, then the Lord said to Moses, this very thing that you have spoken I will do, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. Moses said, please show me your glory. And he said, I will make, so we'll stop there just for a second, okay? So God shows up and he says to Moses, hey, yeah, what you've asked, I'll do it for you. Because you're right, you have found favor in my sight and I do know you by name. So then Moses ratchets it up a bit and he says, okay, if that's the case, show me your glory. So he's essentially saying what aspect of God's ways or what aspect of God's character that he wants to know. He wants God to show him his glory. What does he mean by glory? Glory is the idea, it actually, if you break down the Hebrew, it's actually talking about a weightiness or a heaviness. He's saying, show me your weightiness, your heaviness, your splendor, your majesty. Show me your power, is what he's saying. Now, I think if any of us were in Moses' shoes, we'd ask the same question. Okay, I'm going to lead these people that are a hard, stiff-necked, hard-hearted type people. I'm going to lead them, and I'm going to pass through some lands that are not going to be favorable. There's going to be people there that are not favorable towards us. Okay, so if I'm going to keep leading these stiff-necked people into some danger, you better be with us. Not only you better be with us, but show me your power. Show me your glory. Show me your majesty. Show me your splendor. Reveal that to me so that I can be at peace. But anyone else ever going through something tough? God, you just show me how powerful you are because I need your power walking through this thing. That's essentially what Moses is asking. And God says to him, Okay, yeah, I'm going to give you what you want. Verse 19, and he said, I will make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name of the Lord, my name, the Lord, Yahweh is the way that's pronounced in the Hebrew. So he's saying, I'm going to have my goodness pass before you, and goodness can be translated beauty. So Moses is saying, hey, show me your glory. And God's saying, I'm going to show you my beauty. I'm going to show you my goodness. I'm going to show you my beauty. And in the midst of doing that, I'm going to declare my name. And he uses his personal name, the Lord, Yahweh. This is his personal name. A lot of different names the scriptures give to God. This is Yahweh, his personal name. So he's saying to Moses, like, hey, you know me by name, or I know you by name. You're going to know me by name. I'm going to use my personal name, and I'm going to describe to you who I am. So it's not just in the name, but he's saying he's going to declare his personal name, and with it, let him see his character. Now Moses is asking for the character aspects of his glory, his majesty, his splendor, and God's saying, I'm going to show you my beauty and my goodness. So, but God throws out a little side piece here in verse 20. Okay, I'm going to do this for you, but he said, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. That's a weird one, isn't it? He's like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be there, I'm going to reveal myself to you, I'm going to show you my name, I'm going to show you my beauty, but like you can't see this. Like if you see my face, humanity dies when they see my face. There's a whole like theological thing to unpack there, I'm sure. But he's essentially just making it clear that that's not possible. So the Lord said, verse 21, the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, you will be put in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you. I'll cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face can't be seen. It's so cool and so weird at the same time, right? I mean, Moses is saying, show me your glory. And he's like, I'm going to show you my beauty. I'm going to show you my goodness. I'm going to proclaim my name before you. This is how it's going to go down, though. You can't see my face and live. So if you come up by me, there's like a cave in the mountain over here. And what I'm going to do when I come up to you, I'm going to shove you in the cave. Like you're going in the cave, and I'm going to block you with my hand. It's so strange. Like just see like the hand of God coming in, just pushing Moses into a cave on the side of the mountain that just holds him there. And as the face and front side goes past, he's pushed him in the rock, and the face front side, all he's seeing is hand. And then as he's walking by, the hand is released, and you can see his back as he goes by. That's what God's saying. Like, I'll do it for you, Moses, but this is how it's going to go down. This is the only way it can go down. Verse 34. Then the Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I'll write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Be ready by the morning and come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on top of the mountain. No one shall come with you, and let no one be seen throughout all the mountain. Let no flock or herd graze upon the opposite that mountain. So Moses cuts 2 tablets of stone like the first, and he rose early in the morning, and he went up on Mount Sinai, and as the Lord commanded him, and took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. So God tells him when to come up, that no one else should be there. Bring the 2 tablets of stone. Moses gets them and brings them up the second time, which he broke first time. Verse 5. Then the Lord descended in a cloud and stood with him there. Now, doesn't give you much detail at that point, but the detail should already be assumed, right? What did he say he's going to do when he shows up? Hand pushed you on the side. I'll move past you, see my back. So now here in verse 5, he's just saying that took place. That God came as he said he was going to. The Lord descended in a cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. So he said he was going to do these 2 things. I'm going to show you my beauty and my goodness. I'm going to come and bring it to you, and I'm going to declare to you my name, the Lord, Yahweh. So he stands with him there, and proclaims the name of the Lord. The Lord passes before him and proclaims, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgressions and sins, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to 3rd and 4th generation. So God shows up. He puts Moses in the side of the mountain. He lets him see his back. He's there present with him. and he says, I'm going to declare to you my name. He says, the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh is what he says. Yahweh, Yahweh. And what did Moses ask, right? Moses has said, we're on a first name basis here. Like, show me your ways, show me your glory. What's Moses wanting? He's wanting him to come in that power, push him on the side, let him see the back, but then he wants him to describe himself and say, hey, I am God, Yahweh, Yahweh, powerful, strong. Like, I will take care of you and your enemies. Like, I am him. I'm all-knowing, all-powerful, all-seeing. But that's not what God does, right? God says to him, I'm going to come and show you my beauty, and I'm going to declare to you my name. Here's my name. And with my name, my characteristics that make up who I am. If you're going to describe God to someone else, this is God describing himself to Moses. He says, I am Yahweh, Yahweh, merciful and gracious. That's how God describes himself. It's not Yahweh, Yahweh, powerful and supreme. Could you use that and be true? Absolutely. But he shows up to Moses and says, Yahweh, Yahweh, merciful and gracious. Merciful means sympathetic and compassionate. God says to Moses, I am Yahweh, sympathetic and compassionate. I feel when people are going through things. I sympathize with them when they're going through it. I have compassion on people when the evil of this world and the poorness of their choices and choices of others that have affected them, and they're going through it. Like, I feel it, and I have compassion on people. I'm Yahweh, and I'm merciful. I'm Yahweh, Yahweh, and I'm gracious. When he's talking about graciousness here, when you hear the word grace, think the idea unmerited favor. Hopefully you've heard that from me multiple times, and hopefully you'll hear it multiple times again. Grace is the idea of unmerited favor. The favor of someone given to you, not because you've earned it, but because they are a merciful and gracious person. Their favor. So God's saying is, my character, who I am, as Yahweh, I am gracious. I give out favor that is not deserved. Can you think of, in your life, maybe people who have given you favor that you didn't deserve it, or maybe people you've given favor to that haven't deserved it? I think thinking through it this last week a little bit, the greatest description I can have of that is my children. Now, of course, not perfect. Like, sometimes they deserve it, sometimes they don't deserve it. But my favor is towards them. Like, my heart is towards them, not because they've done well today or haven't done well today. My favor is towards them because I love them and they're mine. It's not merited by them. They don't have to do anything to earn it or not earn it. My favor is towards them. God's saying here, like, his character, Yahweh, Yahweh, I am sympathetic, compassionate, and my favor is towards people that don't deserve it, that haven't earned it. That's who he is. He goes on from there. Yahweh, Yahweh, slow to anger. I am Yahweh, Yahweh, slow to anger. Does God get angry? He does. He's angered by evil and sin and injustice and the brokenness of this world. Like, I don't think we'd want it any other way. When you're going through it and someone has done something to you, or the brokenness of this world is affecting you, like, there's a righteous anger that wells up against that. God is angered about injustice and the evil that's in this world. But he's very slow to get there. He's long-suffering, as other passages of the Bible will describe him. He will suffer long with the evil and injustice in this world, and he'll go through that for long periods of time. He will get to anger, but it'll take him a long time to get there. Yahweh, Yahweh, the Lord who is slow to anger. Yahweh, Yahweh, who is abounding in steadfast love. Abounding. He is rich in steadfast love. His steadfast love is vast. It's just the idea of, like, steadfast love. Like, love given to me in a way which is going to push through the difficulties of time and life. It's steadfast. It's not a love that's like that spikes at one moment and is gone later. Like, oftentimes love that we experience. Like, this is a steadfast love. And he is rich in that steadfast love. That's who he is. Yahweh, Yahweh, who is also abounding in faithfulness. He is rich and vast in faithfulness. The idea of faithfulness is the idea of trust or trustworthiness, consistency. That he is trustworthy and consistent. It's the character of who he is. He's abounding in that. It says he's also keeping steadfast love for thousands, keeping the idea of protecting and watching over steadfast love for thousands. He's the one watching over the ability for us to love him and to love him in return. Guarding over that. It says he's Yahweh, Yahweh, also forgiving iniquity, transgressions, and sins. He's a forgiving God. So when he's describing himself, he is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. He is keeping steadfast love for thousands and forgiving iniquity, transgressions, and sins. Moses said, show me your glory. And God's like, I'm going to show you my beauty. And my beauty is found in my mercy and graciousness. And my long-suffering, my slow to anger, and I'm a forgiving God. He's a forgiving God. He wants to forgive you. He longs to forgive you. He longs to forgive me. His forgiveness is so on his heart that he is willing to put in skin in the game and sacrifice himself to make sure that that's possible. He's willing to forgive any wrong at any time. It's the character of who he is. Now, some might look at this and say, okay, well, God's gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding, like if he will forgive anything, like same kind of thing, like as last week, why is there any motivation for change? Like, how can God just be this gracious thing, like we're not going to change, we're just going to take advantage of it? Same thing that Paul said last week, right? By no means, God forbid. How can those of us who have died to sin continue to live in it? Now, while he shows you his graciousness, he's not showing you his grace and his mercy aside from his justice. Right? He gets to that. Right? Here's the next line. But, right, I've described you all my graciousness and mercy, but who will by no means clear the guilty. Clearing the guilty is meaning the idea of not leaving unpunished those who are guilty. So, he's saying that same thing, like, you better know, like, my primary characteristic is mercy and grace and long-suffering and faithfulness and forgiveness. That is who I am. But don't take that to believe that I'm not also just and going to clear those and leave unpunished those who are guilty. He even goes on to say this next line, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and children's children to the third and fourth generation. That is a strange line there, is it not? This one is debated quite a bit. What is meant by this? Is this the idea that, like, God in his justifiable anger towards sin and evil in this world, that he is going to punish children for their parents' mistakes, or punish grandchildren for their grandparents' mistakes, or great-grandchildren for great-grandma and grandpa's mistakes? Is that what he's saying? I think not, specifically based off Ezekiel 18:20, and others like this, but Ezekiel 18:20 says, the soul whose sins shall die, the son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. Right? The father's not suffering for the son, and the son's not suffering for the father. That we are all, the soul whose sins shall die, the righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be on themselves. It's on us individually. So then back up what I think God is describing to himself to Moses. I think he's saying that there's a generational aspect of sin. I think there's that idea that a sin that's presented from a father or mother to children oftentimes becomes a part of their life. Often is observed and learned and becomes a part of them to the extent that they know it or not, it becomes a part of them and is oftentimes passed down to generations. Some of this I'm mindful in my own heart, and some of this I don't even know sometimes when I'm doing it, and it's just so ingrained in me. But I can absolutely see sins of my grandfather and my father that I do and wrestle with. I can absolutely see sins of my mother and whatever else that become part of who I am. And being mindful of that to some extent helps me to think through and say, like, I hope some of this dies with me. I hope and pray that some of the stuff I wrestle with die with me. I'm sure I'm passing on other stuff that I don't even know that they're going to wrestle with. But the idea here is we're all accountable to God on our own. And don't take God's merciful, gracious nature as a way of saying that, like, there's still not accountability for our actions. But God's letting us know that while he is a just God, he is primarily a merciful and gracious God. And he will forgive iniquity, transgressions, and sins. And he's slow to get to anger. So it's interesting, how does Moses respond when he hears this, right? If you remember the whole thing, like, you're going to lead my people. And Moses is like, you better come with me. And if you're coming with me, you better show yourself to me. Show me your power. Let me know you're going to be powerful with us, your glory. And God shows up and says, hey, I'm Yahweh. I am merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, forgiving iniquity, transgressions, and sins. And here's how Moses' response, verse 8. And Moses quickly bowed his head towards the earth and worshipped. That's just, it is the biblical response to any time someone sees God. When they see him, when they know his character, when they know something about him, when he shows up and reveals himself to humanity, what does humanity do? They drop to their knees, they bow their head to the ground, and they worship. This is Isaiah 6 when he's in the throne room of God. Who am I? I'm a person of unclean lips, and I'm a people of unclean lips, and he falls to the ground and he worships God. This is my hope each and every time we come in here on a Sunday, or each and every time you open the scriptures with your group of people you study with, or anytime we open the scriptures, I want to see God more. Because the more we see him, we will respond in worship. We will respond in honoring him and trusting him and following him and worshiping him. And so, in Moses' point, he's like, basically like, God, show me your power so I can lead these people. And God says, hey, I'm going to show you my mercy and my grace. And then the words that Moses says after that is profound, right? He bows his head and worships God, and then he says to him, if I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst with us. For it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. He changed a bit here. Right? It's no longer the like, hey, come with me and show me your power. Now it's, hey, we're hard-hearted people. Forgive us. Forgive us. Come with us. Don't leave us. If we have the favor that you said that we had, it's no longer the favor to show me that you're powerful and will walk me through this. It's now show me the favor to forgive me because we are a hard-hearted people, and I'm leading a hard-hearted people here. So, God, shower us with your grace and mercy if that's who you are. And then I would throw this, for me, like the core for this is God saying, hey, all the descriptions you can throw out about yourself, let God describe himself. And the primary thing he says about himself is he is merciful and gracious and slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. That doesn't mean he's going to clear the guilty, but it is who he is. And if that's who he is, like, own that for ourselves. My God has been gracious and merciful to me time and time again over my life. He continues to be gracious and merciful to me, and I trust and know that he will continue to be gracious and merciful for me. If that's the case, as Jesus said, if we're going to be someone who receives mercy, we should be a person that gives out mercy as well. This is my hope, right, for myself and for us as a church. This is the idea of a culture of grace, that we are a people that receive grace and that we are a people that extend grace. We give sympathy and compassion to people. We give favor to people who may or may not deserve that favor. We are going to be people that suffer long with people and are slow to getting to anger about something. Can we be a people that are faithful and someone that someone can rely on? A person that shows and reveals steadfast love, a love that's going to be there and continue through the ups and downs of life. And are we going to be a people that are forgiving? Iniquity, transgressions, and sins. God says that's who he is. You can count on that from your God. And we're coming in here each and every week to learn more about that's the God that we love and serve. And as God gives that to us, Lord, help us to be a people, individual, and a place as a church that can extend that same kind of grace, mercy, long-suffering, love, all of that to somebody else. This is not easy. And I don't say this in a way to say, let's be a gracious people and totally ignore justice. We talked about that 2 or 3 weeks ago. We want to be a just people that honor God with our actions, and when we see evil actions in this world, do what we can to push back on those. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Not a lack of justice, but even through justice, that we would be a gracious and merciful people. So, I don't fully know all that God would want to do through you in this passage, but I do believe that I hope that we can see God as God describes himself, a merciful, gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in stead. Like if we would see him as that nature, I would hope that you would know that's your God. If you want to know him on a first name basis and for him to tell you the character of who he is, he just told you who he is. Believe that for yourself. Believe that for your life. Believe that for the life of those around you. And then, Lord willing, as we come together and gather as a church, we would trust and believe that as we engage one another. That when people walk in this church, they would see a God of mercy and grace, because they see a God of mercy and grace through the people of this church. I think there's much for myself to grow in this area, and I would assume maybe for us as well. Let's go ahead and ask God to work in all this. He knows. His Spirit knows exactly what each of us need. So let's go ahead and pray and ask for him to guide us in this time of response. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much. Thank you for your word and how it challenges and changes us, Lord, and you reveal to us who you are. Thank you for showing Moses thousands of years ago, and then through that showing us today, Lord, that you are a God who is merciful and gracious. You're a God that is sympathetic and compassionate to those who are wrestling with things and going through things. And Lord, you're also a God who gives favor to those that don't deserve it. Thank you for your favor to me. Definitely someone who doesn't deserve it. Lord, thank you for your long-suffering nature, your steadfast love, your faithfulness, your forgiveness. Lord, I pray that through that, you would continue to make me a more forgiving, loving, compassionate, merciful, gracious person. Lord, I pray that for us as a whole, that one of the key characteristics of this church would be a church that's filled with grace and mercy. That it would be evident to anyone who walks in these doors, and evident to one another as we engage one another. Lord, not as a way that we push away justice, but Lord, as a way that we uphold your grace and your mercy. Make us more gracious, Lord. Change us. Make us more like Jesus. We love you and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.